1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
I see it coming through. Perfect.
seeing, I saw something, like, the network was crunching down, crunching it down, so I did drop already 112. So I'll keep an eye on it. But, yeah, it's tight. Not a lot.
And that is, so how would we remedy that if we wanted to broadcast football?
Using this city Wi-Fi, or using this, the internet line in here.
Yes. Or would we need a different kind of internet service? Okay.
If you wanted to do some HD stuff,
Yeah.
some good quality stuff, yeah, you need a little bit more.
Bigger
than what you're
tube.
getting. Yeah.
Okay.
Usually, for good solid HD video, we usually account for about 5 megs up. 5 megs. So tonight we were looking at 3.8,
Okay.
and that's before anybody else gets in. So I'm betting that you'll probably see some compression happening. Like you might get a little bit of buffering in there and stuff like that.
Okay.
Especially once we start moving around and following the conversation. It forces a little bit more information to be typed at once. But in the future, you could also do. I'd have to look at the projector in there. But you could also just cable it right in.
Yeah.
That would be an option in the
Okay.
future too. It's
So
not
we
a
have,
long run.
sorry, we have 3 journalists connected by Wi-Fi already. Is that affecting?
I'm seeing some crunching, so I dropped it down to quality, basically half a meg. So yeah, we'll see once we get moving around, but I'm still at 1.5 for projector. You probably don't want to go much lower than 1. Right now I'm at 1.5. I started at 2.
Yeah, I think it's just these 3 guys that are connected to wireless. The rest of the guys should just be doing different stuff. Hopefully they're not.
Basically, it's gonna be a little bit pixelated,
Yeah.
but you'll still be able to hear everything super clear. Like, in that
Yeah.
mic check, we got lots of audio,
Yeah.
lots of audio.
Yeah.
I'll stick around for a little bit, just in case you get questions like, who's this guy?
Seems likely.
And I don't know that, it's not full in here, so how if we buy the tech and I'd be able to do it ourselves, but this is a bridge solution between now and then.
Yep.
So I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And if throughout while your team kind of explores the options, if you guys have any random questions, you have my email now, so you can.
We will have random questions, for sure. Like, what's this box? No.
It's all good.
Thank you.
Gotta start it out loud. We'll say it out loud later. Bruce wanted me to see that. Oh, here. Earplugs. You're not gonna know. I'll just bring it in later on. Believe me.
An hour.
boss too.
I'm Tara. Nice to meet you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had it at my desk and saw it handed to this inside one thing.
Oh, okay.
Settle in.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I'm sorry that we're late. We're just finishing up the in-camera meeting, and we'll be right out as soon as we can. Based on the conversation in my speakers list, I'd say maybe another 10 minutes or so, so I'm really sorry, but I just wanted to let you know. Okay? is on our open agenda and listed. Council voted to go into closed under only the one item, and it's on here identified as solid resources, business service material recovery facility findings. Act under section 2392BD, which was relating to personal matters about an identifiable individual or including municipal or local board employees or labor relations or negotiations. So just to let
participate comparators who below the benchmark. The city make changes to the existing operation or other options for processing recyclables in the future. Possible options will be examined during the next phase of the business service review, and of course a final report will be in front of council later this fall. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn over the podium to Tomoko King to come up and walk us through the beginning of these slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and staff and community. Ensuring effective and efficient delivery of service is part of city's responsibility. Conducting service reviews and implementing identified improvements support meeting this responsibility. This framework, approved by Council in October 2016, provides a repeatable process to prioritize, select, and review services and processes.
Impacts, recommendations, and milestones moving forward. We will report on all of this work coming up in November with a final report. The service review as conducted is a collaborative process based on the fundamental principles of stakeholder engagement and open communication. As previously mentioned by Ms. King, Catherine Gray from the Corporate Project Management Office has been leading the review, supported by Cam Walsh and the management team from Solid Waste Resources. We have also enjoyed the support and participation of our staff, many of whom are in attendance tonight. It is never easy to be under the spotlight, and staff continue to soldier on, complete the important work and necessary as review and iterative transparency and cooperation. Engaged CUPE early. CUPE is the union that represents solid waste employees. We have engaged them to participate in the review through the Material Recovery Facility, or MRF as we call it, where the sorting of recyclable material happens. We have source separations happening at our organics facility, and that's the composting of Guelph in the region of Waterloo's organic waste. And the transfer station handles the waste that goes to our contract landfill. Guelph is a community reliant on pristine local groundwater as a source of municipal drinking water. In my past life, I've been very proud of the work that our special hazardous waste operations does in collecting and safely disposing of this waste, and in doing so protecting our groundwater and the environment. This interim report provides information on 6 waste service categories. Information on the performance of the remaining services, including administration and customer service, will be included in the final report. Municipal benchmarking support was provided through Dillon Consulting Limited. Dillon was selected to assist Guelph with this service review based on their familiarity with Guelph's services, experience, and technical expertise with solid waste services benchmarking practices and analysis, and for their experience with our municipal comparators. They've provided us a window into those other communities to get their data, and that we appreciate. Overall, 12 comparative municipalities were selected and participated in the benchmarking analysis. The goal was to have at least 2 comparator municipalities for each waste service element. The rationale for comparator selection included being part of the council-approved municipal comparator list, having similar and yet different service delivery approaches, for example, own and operate versus own and contract out, or contract out period, and having similar and different approaches for level of service and or technology used. For example, a mix of facilities that process single stream versus two stream recyclables. Key indicators used during the comparison included service level, service type, average cost per ton, and average cost per customer. I'll now hand the presentation back to Ms. King, who will walk you through the benchmarking results for these services.
Thank you, Mr. Busato. Now, before I jump into these slides, now for ease of following the presentation, I'll be walking you through the 6 processes that the review has examined today, one by one. Each process will have 3 elements, or 3 slides. 1, the current services that the city provides. 2, the municipality benchmarking results. And 3, next steps. The first process is the collections. Currently, 3-stream waste collection, in other words, organics, the green bin, recycling, the blue bin, and waste, the gray bin, is provided to over 48,000 customers, which includes single-family households, multi-residential units, and businesses. And this operation is staffed by 18 city staff utilizing automated collection equipment. During the benchmarking activities, it was noted that Guelph was the only municipality among the comparator municipalities selected that provides collection service solely through the use of in-house staff. Overall, Guelph provides a similar level of service to its comparator municipalities, with a higher level of service to the downtown business area and a lower level of service related to curbside collection of bagged leaf and yard waste, as described on page 10 of the report. Each process will have the same graph, and I will now explain how to interpret this graph. City of Guelph is always the first bar on the left in green. The blue bars across are the other municipalities selected for each process. These bars indicate the average net cost per ton for each municipality, whereas the red line across the bar represents the average of all municipalities compared per process. The orange dots indicate the material tonnage. Looking at this particular graph, the average cost for comparative municipalities is approximately $128 per ton of material collected, as Guelph's collects are an average of $10 per material collected. This indicates that the Guelph's cost to provide the curbside collection service is in line and competitive with the average cost of the comparator municipalities. The service review will not review further the collection service in relation to overall comparative performance and alternative service delivery. However, potential opportunities for further improvements or service enhancements in the area of multi-residential service and leaf and yard waste collection have been identified. Therefore, further research and analysis in these areas will be conducted. Additional community engagement activities were also conducted, such as an open house here at the City Hall, and both phone and online surveys, which included questions about the downtown public space containers, leaf and yard collections, multi-residential collection services. The surveys have just been completed, and the results will be included in the final report. The second process that we've reviewed is the city's organic services. Guelph's organic waste processing facility processes source-separated organics, which is organic waste collected separately from other streams of waste at the source, such as at homes and restaurants, to produce compost. This operation and maintenance of the facility is currently contracted to Wellington Organics, Inc. In addition, the City of Guelph has a contract with the Region of Waterloo to process their residential organic waste in addition to our own. Based on analysis of a mixed service delivery methods, such as own and external facility, our analysis indicates that our process is in line when compared to another similar process, and that the cost per ton charged. The toll bars that you see, the second and the fourth, indicate that our process fees are also in line. Guelph's overall average cost of $40 per ton of material collected to process organic waste based on current tonnage is below the comparator average of approximately $80 per ton of material collected. The benchmarking and performance data analysis indicate that the organic service is in line with comparative municipalities. While there are always continuous improvement opportunities, the service review will not review these processes further. However, next steps of the service review include a review of current contracts and any potential changes and implications. The third process we've reviewed is the public drop-off and transfer station. Currently, 2 public drop-off areas are provided for residents: a free recycling drop-off zone accepting recyclables, yard waste, household hazardous waste, and paper shredding, and pay zone for waste material accepting construction and demolition waste, garbage, appliances, and others. The city also operates a transfer station where waste, the garbage that cannot be diverted from landfill, is collected for transfer to a private waste disposal site, Twin Creek Landfill. The public drop-off and transfer station have a staffing structure of approximately 20 full-time employees, including a supervisor, lead hand, operators, and health and safety staff. It is important to note that while the City of Guelph is able to separate the resources and costs associated with the public drop-off and transfer station, the majority of comparator municipalities are unable to do the same. For this reason, for this comparison, the Guelph's public drop-off and transfer station information, including costing and resourcing, were combined for comparator analysis. Analysis indicates that the Guelph's cost to provide public drop-off and transfer station services is in line or lower than the comparator municipalities at $15 per ton of material. However, the confidence rating in this data is low to moderate due to the inability to separate out staffing and other relevant costs of comparator municipalities. Further attempts were made to improve the comparator costing and resourcing data with little improvement in the overall confidence rating. We will continue to make additional efforts to develop data and measurement methodologies and tools to provide the ability to analyze service performance in the future. Progress to accurately define current service performance and potential for improvement will be included in the final report. The fourth process reviewed is the city's services on municipal hazardous special waste. Currently, household hazardous waste depot is provided at the public drop-off year-round, Tuesdays through Saturday, closed on Mondays. The depot is staffed by 2 full-time employees. Hazardous waste includes items such as aerosol cans, fire extinguishers, medicine, paint, antifreeze, propane tanks, and others. In 2016, approximately 260 tons of hazardous material was collected at this depot, and for 2017, it is estimated that approximately 290 tons will be collected. The number of average annual visits is increasing with more than 20,000 visits per year. The benchmarking data indicates the current cost to operate the household hazardous waste depot is $559 per ton. This is in line and lower than comparator municipalities, indicating that Guelph service is effective and competitive. Based on these findings, the comparative and performance analysis is complete for this area. However, hours of operation will be investigated for opportunities to identify improvements and service enhancements. as concerns about hours of operation were the most frequently raised item during the community engagement activities. The fifth process we've reviewed is the city's residual waste management and disposal services. The city of Guelph currently has a contract with Waste Management to haul and dispose residual waste, the waste that cannot be diverted from landfill to a private landfill, Twin Creek. The waste indicates waste from city collection and commercial waste dropped off at the transfer station. The cost for this service are based on Guelph's collected waste tonnage. The cost for the haul and dispose of collected residual waste are estimated to be approximately $60 per ton of material, which is in line with the municipality average. The preliminary benchmarking and performance data analysis indicates that the current method for disposal of residual waste is on a par with municipal comparators. No further analysis will be done on this process. As with most city services, ongoing continuous improvement activities will continue with an effort to identify better ways to measure performance. The sixth process we reviewed is the city's material recovery facility services. Guelph's current facility is a single stream facility that processes an average of 20,000 to 30,000 tons of recyclable material per year. Single stream process means that the residents and businesses are placing all recyclable, such as paper, plastic, metal, glass, and cardboard, into the same blue cart, which is a simpler process for customers and also a lower collection cost than dual stream. This collected recyclable material is later sorted in the material recovery facility by the city staff. In addition to Guelph's own material, the city currently has a contract with Simcoe County to receive and process their containers. The costs shown here are the net cost of processing and revenues from the sale of recyclable material. The average net cost for comparative municipality is less than $1 per ton of material collected. And in fact, all but one other municipality is making profits, while Guelph's processing costs are an average of $90 per ton of material collected. This data indicates that Guelph's cost to process recyclable material at the MRF is significantly higher than the average cost of the comparator municipalities. There are a number of factors that impact the cost of this service, including staffing composition, contractual obligations, infrastructure and asset conditions, resource availability, market trends, legislative requirements, and material and revenue streams. Further investigation and analysis is required for the material recovery facility to identify potential recommendations, which will include impact of the Simcoe contract, process audit of material processing, research on potential impacts of the extended producer responsibility changes, which is an upcoming provincial legislative change explained on page 25 of the report, and service delivery method analysis. Based on the outcome of the analysis, the city may consider changes to the existing operation or other options for processing recyclables in the future. Possible options will be examined during the next phase of this review and will be reported in the final report. This wraps up the highlights of the interim report and its findings to date. In conclusion, while service review work is continuing, initial findings show that 5 of 6 City of Guelph waste services are in line and cost competitive with comparative municipalities. Next steps in the business service review include additional analysis of leaf and yard waste collection, multi-residential collection services, material recovery facility, public drop-off, data methodology and confidence, and hours of operation and shift structure for potential service enhancements. This additional work will provide more in-depth data analysis and potential recommendations for improvements in the Solid Waste Resources Business Service Review final report. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Mayor Guthrie to take questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to staff for the presentation. So based on the presentation, is there any questions? I'll start with Councillor McKinnon and then work my way around. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, through you, Mr. Mayor. Question on slide 24, the MRF benchmarking. The one comparator that is quite high at 106 tons and is also paying money for the recyclables. Is that a single stream municipality? I know it's not identified, but I just wonder if you had that information.
And if I could just ask staff if a councillor or myself has a question in regards to one of the slides, would it be okay if you went up to the presentation and moved it to that slide so that everyone can see kind of what the question is addressing? I would appreciate that. So Councillor McKinnon, what slide did you say?
Slide 24.
Yeah. I think that's better, just so everyone can kind of see what we're talking about. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, I believe you're talking about municipality L on the graph? Yes, it is a single stream operation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Piper.
Yes, thank you. My question was about the comparator municipalities. Normally when we, through you, Mr. Mayor, get a report, we actually know who the comparator municipalities are. And I see in the Dillon report, page 4, that the 10 municipalities are listed, but they're just numbered. Do those correspond with the A, B, C, D, E, F, G? And if they don't, is there a reason why we can't see what the comparator municipalities are? And the reason I ask that through you, Mr. Mayor, is that it often helps us to be able to frame whether or not it's a highly dense municipality. Is it a GTA municipality? Is it a municipality that has a large number of institutions and large businesses? Is there a rural component to that municipality and the outlying suburbs? It helps us to be able to provide some kind of context to some of the figures that we're seeing. I read the letter that went out to the municipalities. I didn't see any limitation of disclosure where we guaranteed confidentiality. So I wondered if we could get a match of A, B, C, D, what municipalities are represented in the report.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, part of the discussions, sort of ongoing discussions we had with the municipalities, none of them really wanted to be identified. So that then they're pulled into, as you can see, this chart's not a good one, but there'll be charts where municipality G, or whatever one may be, is not shown favorable against their comparator municipalities. And they didn't want to get into a whole review back home for them without their councils being aware of it. So for a lot of the commitments from landlords, we would share with you if it is confidential, but if you're going to start to identify us, we'd like not to give you any information. So that was part of the discussion we had with them at the early days about getting the information so that you could at least see this comparison. And Councillor Piper, I certainly understand sort of the rest of the questions you've had, and that's why we tried to vet it against your comparable list. So at least there was a sense of who's at play, and we're not going to compare, really truly the City of Toronto versus Guelph. But part of the commitment is they really didn't want their information shared publicly.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Billings.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Okay, first question would then be on residual waste, and so I can't see the slide. So it is slide 20. You talk about it. However, when you have the total costs for the organics and the MRF, the recycling, were those residual waste costs apportioned to the organics or to the MRF?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. The residual costs for both operations are reflected in the metrics for those.
So organics is including that residual waste, and
Yes.
the MRF is including their residual waste?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. And then also on the back of the report, so I'll speak about organics. It says excludes debt financing and internal Guelph tip fees, but it includes capital reserve and tip fees. So can you explain the difference there in the tip fees, that it includes this tip fees but not Guelph tip fees? Can you just explain the tip fees, like, and why that's excluded, and if you know how much that would be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, just allow me to lean a little closer here. We're getting a little close over here. The internal tip fees were excluded as they net zero each other out. So while there's an expense at the MRF, there's an incoming recovery at the transfer station. So it's really just moving your base money around. So under review with finance, it really was confusing. So in order to look at the true cost of the service, we just net zeroed out the internal tip fees. But any external tipping fees are included in the costs and revenues for the services.
Okay, and then also through you, Mr. Mayor, it doesn't include the debt financing. So if it doesn't include the debt financing, does it include as a cost amortization? Because we had, we spent around $30 million to build the composter.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, just as our treasurer is coming down, and I think can give you lots of good answers, there's a lot of detail yet, Councillor Billings, that we haven't got yet on what's all in, what's capital, what capital is in, and at what stage is that infrastructure. So that is material that we think is important for you to have, and it'll certainly make its way into the final report.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, so those numbers will make its way through for the MRF and for the organics, or just the MRF, the recycling?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, it'll be for all of our facilities, including the transfer station. There's a certain, they're all at different ages of their life cycle, and we want to make sure that you're able to see the cost, and this is our first blush at it, but you're able to see the cost, and that's included in, and as you've articulated from that sort of extended sheet, what does debt financing look like when it's included, and what does it not look like when it's included? That's a commitment that we've got from our financial group, and I'll look to Ms. Baker if there's anything else that she needs to add to that, but that's our commitment. You'll get the full costing for those facilities.
Okay, so then through you, Mr. Mayor, to Scott, so then you're capturing then on the very last sheet, the table, the very bottom under the MRF, it says costing to be finalized, and then when you go to page 25 of 27 in the report, then it speaks to all the factors and the costs, contractual obligations, infrastructure, asset condition, all that. So all those numbers will be coming then in the next report?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that Councillor Billings, that's a good place to take everybody. That page 25 under MRF Next Steps. It's not only the bulleted, highlighted piece that you see there, it's the paragraph above that list, that number of factors that you've just described. We will share with you what we have, and if we're missing information, that will be clearly shared as well, so that it's an eyes wide open decision-making moment with all of us. So again, market trends, there's a good example of market trends can really be subject to time of year. It can really be subject to, like all commodities, they fluctuate. And so there's sometimes no way to really guarantee market trends, but some of the issues that you'll want to hear from us are what type of reserves have we got in place to deal with market trends? And you will hear us answer that fully and completely.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, so that at the end of the day when you come back, you're going to have an assessment of all the impacts plus all the capital costs.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, that's clearly the intention. And if we can't do that, we'll highlight the fact that says we can't get this information and it's blank for this reason, so that you shouldn't have to guess if things are in and out. We'll be real clear on what's in, and if things are out, we'll be real clear on what things have been left out as well, because we can't actually put a number to it.
Okay, well, that's really helpful. Then next, through you, Mr. Mayor, just above that on page 25, Scott, again, it references this extended producer responsibility, and you have there pending significant provincial legislation changes. So I'm going to agree with that because I do think it'll be significant. And usually when we have a legislative change, I mean, it can help or it can hinder, but I can see that this possibly could help us with funding. So if that's the case, first question is, given when this report was written to today, do you know anything else? I know you're going to report on it again, but do you know anything else?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, nothing that would be helpful to this conversation at all.
Okay, and then when we say that we're going to have a report back to us in November, is that truly enough time in order to assess this impact, so that we really have a good feel for this? Because to me, this is a huge variable.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we completely concur. This is a huge variable. Our dilemma is that we're having ongoing conversations with the province, our friends at AMO, our associates across the province in the solid waste field. Our dilemma is this legislation, as it's working its way through the system, might not be actually in play until the year 2019. So we may end up having to have some scenarios for you that would say this may happen. And if you don't like that, here's what we know. So again, we're going to be in that betwixt and between period, I think. It would be nice if we can give you a lot more detail between now and the November 20th target, but I don't know that we'll get a lot of clarity prior to the new year. And of course, then you have municipal, provincial elections. So we're asking for clarity from the provincial folks. Will that make any difference to this legislation? And hopefully we'll get a clear articulated message on that as well.
Okay, thanks for your help, Scott.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Salisbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. When I read the Dillon report with regards to the comparator list, I was really pleased at the diversity that it was selected. 12 comparators of different sizes, different similar features and dissimilar features. The question I have, though, is why is it that in our comparator analysis, and we'll use residual waste management, disposal, and benchmarking as an example, why is it that we do not have 13 bars if we have 12 comparators? That's why I asked.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we selected 12 municipalities. However, not all 12 provide the same service or a mixture of the service that we needed. So we chose the 12, and then out of that 12, the appropriate mixture of services to compare to.
And that's what I thought too at first. I thought, well, that would make sense. Not all of them, for instance, the hazardous waste has only 2 bars. You know, perhaps only 2 of the 12 comparators deal with hazardous waste. But when we deal with things like collections benchmarking, where there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is, by the way, slide 9, there's only 5. I'm thinking that of the 12 comparators, most of them are going to collect, probably more than 5. I wonder if you could speak to the rationale for inclusion and exclusion in comparator analysis, where I would assume there is going to be similar services provided.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're going to ask Dylan to come up, Betsy Varghese with Dylan to start the answer to that question.
Fantastic, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Our objective was to have at least 2 services or 2 comparator municipalities to compare against the city. And in some cases, as Catherine mentioned, the 12 that we selected, some of the elements may not have been relevant to what we were looking for, or we would have had a number of comparators that were all around the same. So if we had a few that had similar service levels, so similar service delivery options, we didn't include all of them. And in some cases, the elements weren't appropriate to compare to the city. And not so much as they don't offer the service, but it's offered in a different manner that wasn't appropriate for us to compare to. So our objective was to look for at least 2 comparator municipalities.
I appreciate that. If we could just maybe drill down with the simple one, collections, which is now up on the screen. What I am hearing you say is that there were some of the comparators that did not offer the service. I would think that collections is not going to be an example, a good example of that, but there may be ones that for one reason or another didn't merit comparison. Am I correct on that?
No, not that it didn't merit comparison, it's that we had a sufficient number of comparators, what we deemed to be a sufficient number of comparators that would give us that spectrum that we were looking for, some similar and some dissimilar.
Okay, so just for clarity's sake then, with regards, and I'm gonna use collections as an example because it's an easy one. With collections, we would have assembled the data from the complete data set. Is that correct?
Sorry, do you mean we would have asked for information?
We would have asked collections, benchmarking, average cost per ton. I mean, there's a real simple baseline. Cost per ton is not complex. It's sort of the benchmark of all benchmarks. Cost per ton of collection, we would have asked that of the 12 municipalities as part of the process that we went through. We didn't get, or did we not get answers from some of them with regards to collection average cost per ton?
So no, through you, Mr. Mayor, we were selective in the municipalities that we selected, and then also in the services that we were going to be approaching the municipalities to participate in. So the comparator municipalities were asked to provide information on a certain, whichever services that we asked them to. So we didn't ask any municipality in that fact to respond to every service.
Okay. What was the rationale, the selection rationale as to why we made that decision, that scoping of that rather robust comparator list, when we scoped that down to, in this example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we spoke to. So I'm guessing that what you're saying is that we only spoke to 5 comparators with regards to collections benchmarking.
That's correct. What was the
Rationale used for selecting that 5 from the comparator list of 12?
So
and I'm guessing that rationale would be for each service we explored.
That's correct. So our objective was to the next one, look at municipalities that are on council approved municipality list, and 2, we're looking at service the comparator municipalities that similar and dissimilar service delivery approach and level of service. And so if we found that we had a mix that represented both, we didn't ask 5 of the same, or 5 municipalities, or ones that perform the same level of service, service delivery approach. To respect the time of the municipalities, we did want to look at what we need to have that we felt that we needed to have to provide a fair comparison to a lot of back and forth and time of our comparator municipalities to participate in this. So we were selective in that approach, in that respect.
When I hear that, I'm concerned of statistical bias. I wonder if you can address that concern.
Can you clarify?
Well, if we have a comparator list of 12, which are selected for a diverse number of reasons, both similar and dissimilar, contracted and non-contracted, a really wide variety, urban, rural, the whole 9 yards. We've got that. And we select from that, and in some cases only 2. I'm going to suggest, for perhaps as an example, so collections is a good one because I'm thinking everyone collects. But hazardous waste, we only selected 2, and I could suspect that maybe there might be some municipalities that don't deal with hazardous waste, but I'm thinking more than 2 probably do. And then if we're going from our comparator list down to 2 without a strong rationale as to why we've done so, it could be cherry picking, and it could be it could provide dramatically different results in statistical bias from that scoping of our comparator list with regards to each service. So, 5 or 6 could again be wildly swayed one way or the other, but 2 it's almost statistically irrelevant.
So in the case of hazardous waste management, many of the municipalities have a very similar program, and it's a very small element of the program. So we didn't see the need to look for 12 municipalities that run similar programs, which is typically a depot that's located at a region or a municipal facility or a private sector facility through a contract with the municipality.
With all due respect, through you, Mr. Mayor, isn't that the essence of what we're actually here to do? Is to, in fact, compare ourselves to others who are similar, and with regards to cost and service levels, so that if we have a graph that they're all the same, I'm okay with that. But to not have that information simply because we thought that they'll be the same doesn't give me the confidence that we have, in fact, addressed whether we are ahead or behind the pack, if you will. And again, it goes back to my previous question with regards to statistical bias and selecting ones that, that without rationale as to why we've pared it down. So, well, I guess the question I'm gonna ask is there more data available, or is this all that we're gonna get?
Scott Stewart, our Deputy CAO, would like to respond.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so let me comment that 2 ways. There is other data that we have, and we'll make sure in the final report we're listening loud and clear to everybody's commentary tonight. But we also spent a little bit of time with some of the folks on the list, and I'm going to try and I'm trying not to out the people on the list, but there are some things that they identify from their perspective. So would you like, this is our cost of collection, but it's rural costs. And that would have been important to us if we had had our collection costs down into urban, suburban, rural, if you will, but we haven't. So there wasn't a lot of value in us having that piece of it because it does start to skew it. So there's pieces like that. We tried to filter out some a little bit if there was an upper tier, lower tier component of it. So lower tier being responsible for collection, if you will, but the upper tier is responsible for processing. So where was overhead between those two? And if we couldn't match things up, then again, there was no point in having it in here because on one area the overhead will be applied and on another area it's not applied, and then it starts to skew. So I think when the final report comes through, Councillor Salisbury, I think we could satisfy what you're looking at so that you can get a comfort level on what was the rationale. So I think we hear you loud and clear. Get that identified early so that you know that, and then we can walk you through it, and we'll try to do that in a way that gives you comfort, but also stays firm to the commitment that we're not trying to highlight certain municipalities and then they have an issue they have to deal with. So
that is exactly what I'm looking for.
Okay.
If I've got a graph that has 2 bars, 2 comparative municipalities, and 8 empty spaces with an explanation as to why we didn't consider them to be significant or for whatever reason we had for not doing it, it will give me a lot of comfort with the data that otherwise I look at and I have some real challenges with. And it's this data that we're using to make some really important decisions that affect many, many millions of dollars and livelihoods and community levels of service. This is important stuff. So if we've only got 2 and there's a rationale for it, then I can sleep at night with that. But without knowing, without having those blank spaces, say, well, we didn't choose this one because they don't do the service, and we didn't choose this one because it's a lower tier municipality of only 300 population, we just didn't think it was worth comparing to Guelph, it wasn't consistent, you know, and whatever the rationale is, I would need to know that information in order to feel that the data is solid.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we hear you loud and clear. We'll do that. You know, we all want to sleep at night for sure together. Not together, but all collectively. Boy, that's been a long day. Well,
I'd like to
so
call
that's
the vote.
interesting in itself, isn't it? So we want to walk you through it so that if there are special arrangements, the household hazardous waste, Betsy gave a good indication. There's certain arrangements some municipalities have because they've just got them with a particular supplier that you would never have access to. It happens to work out for that municipality. We'll be clear with that as far as we can, identifying them this way, and that will give you that comfort.
I thank you very much.
Thank you.
So many jokes. All right, Councillor Alt.
Thank you very much, Mayor Guthrie. Thank you to Mr. Stewart for volunteering to go home with me, but I'm going home alone. I also, quite seriously, do want to thank the staff who are doing the business service reviews, and especially I want to thank the staff who are involved in the areas where business service reviews are occurring. I know that for many people that this must be an anxious time. I can assure you that there are people here, certainly, that are not intending on looking at this as a method of looking at staff downsizing, but rather we are looking at efficiencies and movements into the future. And that's a frame for my questions, because my concern is that in some senses, when I look at the paper, I see this as, for all intents and purposes, and bear with me please, I hope this isn't offensive, as somewhat of a static review. That we're looking into our crystal ball into the past and not into the future. And what I want to do is I want to look at what we can do better in the future. And to that mind, there are a number of things that are of concern to me. For example, I do know that our solid waste wet-dry system only has a limited lifespan, and I'm wondering how we've calculated that into our review. And if we're not, are we not merely just doing an audit of what we've done in the past, but we haven't looked at how effectively we are going to do this in the future? And I know that's a broad question, but I am hoping that it can be answered, because it's not about yesterday, it's about tomorrow that we need to be concerned.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we put up slide 26 because I think, Councillor Alt, that's what you were talking about is, so what's the next steps? And these next steps really allow us to look forward. So if you look at some of the service pieces that you have on there, we've got a gap in service if you just pick multi-residential service. So that's one that we were saying, there's a gap here, and if you want to look to the future, we probably should service this area of the community. And of course, there's a cost to that. We have to process that material. We have to be confident that we could actually collect it and process it and deal with what ails us. We're identifying the MRF. We've got an older facility with older equipment. So that doesn't mean anything that it's older facility and older equipment, but we may look to other municipalities that run MRFs across this province and say there is a better way to do it with newer equipment, updated equipment. That's where this next steps will take us. So as much as a service level does get you to a static point, it also allows you to open the door to the future and say, there's some considerations we ought to have together. So you'll see all of this flow from the, we've got the November report. Likely some of this will find its way into budget discussions and future deliberations that way. And of course, once you do these things, these should never be lost in the organization. This is stuff that's then in our DNA so that we can stay on top of it, so that you're not having to do a service review every decade or so. You're in front of this stuff. You were proud. You built these facilities at this property in 1996, I think, and they were state of the art. And here we are today with, I think what you're seeing is not a lot of heavy investment in some of the capital expenditures. And we're highlighting that for you. So that's what happens when you leave it and you're static. So you're right to question that. And this is the future for us. And we'll continue to talk about that, I suppose, over this term and the next term of council, no doubt.
and I appreciate you providing that foundation because there are a number of questions related to that that I think bear actually breaking down even further. We've identified in the report that there's approximately 49 customers that are being dealt with at the present time. Within 10 years, do we have an estimate on approximately how many customers, how many people that we're actually going to be dealing with from our local area within our solid waste management system?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to give you a bit of a non-answer to that, but okay, this way, you know, our master plan for solid waste has to be updated and concluded. We got to put some time on that. We bring forward every year our annual guesstimate, if you will, as far as growth in the development sector. So every one of those homes that come on have to be dealt with in some way this way. So we should be identifying that when it comes forward. There's a cause and effect to, if I pick on growth, for example, there's a cause and effect to new subdivisions. Somebody has to drive in there and service it. And that's where we should be, that should be embedded in all of those reports and not just on this back end. They're not DC acceptable at this time, but we're finance staff, we're under a DC review. So it should be flowing from here to the province to request that you allow solid waste to be in there. So there's some work that we could collectively do. It doesn't always belong just in the end service area, Councillor Alt, but I think it belongs into what was our projections, did we meet them, and what's the impact on operations? That's really my message, so that it's real clear. 2,000 homes mean what? It means a truck at some point, because you can't just continue to throw it in the existing fleet that you have. And likely if you buy a truck, you've got to have someone driving it until we get to that stage where we have autonomous vehicles. So we've got those costs as well, and when you pick it up, you actually have to do something with it and process it. So I think we're on for a bit more robust discussion around some of the other reports that we bring to you as well that impact operational concerns and not just in this area.
Yeah, and thank you again. Just following up on that, I appreciate Councillor Piper's comments about population density earlier, because that was certainly a question for me in terms of concentration, and I know that there are people certainly within the audience who I think are going to present who are concerned about the style of housing. I'm presuming that we're probably going to be calculating in a greater density in our housing and how we address condominium and townhouse developments, such as you said, with different and newer equipment.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, that will come, the different newer equipment, but it also, you know, just to expand your thoughts, it leads to other concerns or comments for us. So you have to actually probably change some policy in how we approve. So if you get into multi-res and you want to service all of multi-res, you might have some work for us to say bring a policy forward that says you can't exclude yourself from having municipal collection. Because there's no point in halfway going through these things and we allow the development to happen, and you know what happens over time. Condos move in and they phone you to say how come there's no service. So if you get into some of this sort of future thinking, I think that's where we'll have to end up, and that's that density question. So you have to deal with turning heads and being able to service it so that it's safe when we're in townhouses. And yes, density is important. You get a bigger bang for your buck on one stop, but you've also got to deal with the early stages of the development to make sure that we can actually access it safely for the folks that live there and, of course, our operators.
I appreciate your statements about the Waste Free Ontario Act and other changes that might occur in the near future and affect us perhaps further down the road. Would there have been any value in holding off this particular business service review until such time as we can appreciate how significantly Waste Free Ontario and other legislation could potentially affect us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you know, that's a very interesting question and a difficult one to answer. You know, it just depends on your perspective. There will always potentially be legislative changes. So we see this as coming, but if you were looking for full guarantees, I think you would have to wait until 2019 and then start the service review. So I think we would be out of order at that point. I think this allows us to finish our work, get that done early, and perhaps influence the province and say, this is certainly something in Guelph that you can look to as far as they are looking for sort of regionalization of some of these things. If we've got an effective and efficient MRF operation that we've got well underway, before the sort of legislative changes in 2019 and beyond, it might be something that the province and the producers are looking to say, yeah, we can actually move in with Guelph and partner up differently. So I think it gives us an opportunity to be in front of it. versus waiting for things to be done to us.
And I just realized, I forgot something, and I apologize to anybody who doesn't know what that act is. In my mind, basically, the act basically states, producers, this is your problem, you deal with it. I was wondering if anybody, perhaps you or Ms. King or someone else, could explain whether that's essentially it or whether there's more to it than that.
So through Mr. Mayor, and perhaps it's something that we could put out a bit of a briefing note on, because it's, I like the sort of simplification sort of level you have to it, but it is a little more complicated than that. You know, as far as the end users paying, when they pay, they have a say. And I think there's a big benefit here for municipalities across this province to be involved in having the producers pay. They produce the product. So again, if you think of any packaging, could they have it done differently or a way that we actually don't have to deal with it? You know, so yes, they've done a lot of work and a lot of commodities, but maybe there's another way to do some of this stuff that doesn't involve us collecting it and then by default processing it. And if they were responsible for the back end costs, innovation might come to the table in regards to the product they've put up for sale. So it's a little bit more complicated than they just pay, but we could put a bit of a, not next week, but we could put a bit of a briefing note on what we know so far on that particular file.
And I only have one more question, but I just want to follow up on that a bit, because you just twigged me when you said that. Would this be comparable to what was done with recyclable beverage containers, I think now probably 30 years ago, when we moved from deposits to actually municipalities assuming responsibility for recycling? And is this an opportunity for us to make certain that that horse doesn't bolt before we get it under control?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's similar, that's for sure. You know, once upon a time there was a one-third sharing agreement, and then we moved to sort of WDO and the work that happened out of Stewardship Ontario and all that good stuff in the 80s and 90s. And then it just turned into sort of respectfully, a bit of a scrap between municipalities and producers. And so I think this influence that we might have with, if the province really enacts all of this legislation that puts the cost to the producers, I think that would be important for us to influence it early, similar to those early days, but with an eyes wide open discussion like we're having tonight and later this fall. Here's the costs. So you don't get to ballpark it, producers, respectfully. Here's the costs for this municipality to be in this game. And I think these are important things for us to get through with the province and the producers, to say, we haven't made these numbers up, these are the numbers, this is the cost to run this facility in Guelph. We're always open for continuous improvement, but we'd like to influence your legislation on how funding flows.
Great, thanks. Hopefully we'll be able, not just Guelph, but everywhere we'll be able to do this so that we don't, as I said, drop the ball like we did with the drinking containers. Last question, and it's a fairly important one. I don't know if you can answer this delicately. When we're dealing with the material recycling facility, I'm very, very curious about the efficiency of Guelph residents versus Simcoe residents when it comes to sorting, and whether we are able to sort out, whether we do it better, whether they do it better, or whether we're about the same, and whether this is compounding costs that Guelph absorbs, and for all intents and purposes, Simcoe passes on to us, because for them, it doesn't matter whether people sort or not, they're sending it downstream.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, and I will try to be delicate in response to this, we do certainly audits with the material that we receive from Simcoe. And it's a different audit because we have a contractual relationship with the material that we see coming in from the Guelph residents. So I've got no clear way to answer that tonight, other than we have to do more audits with Simcoe. So that might give you a bit of an indication. But we do have some contractual arrangements with Simcoe that are interesting from us from a running the facility audit perspective, and how we bill and how we share revenues or not. And it's just a different view on how we deal with the Guelph situation because it's ourselves.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr.
And just
Mayor.
be aware of time, everyone, for respect for our delegations that are here as well, okay?
You actually took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say I have questions, but I'm going to save them. I'd really like to get to the delegations.
Okay, thank you. So I had only two more on my list, Councillor Gordon and Councillor Downer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I can make mine brief. Looking at the 6 categories in our review scope. It's number 6, and I'll look at slide 25. That seems to be the odd one out, in that it's one we haven't signed off on yet, and there are still questions about its efficacy. It also stands a little bit differently in my mind when I look at our materials recovery, that I'm wondering how you calculated the value that that service provides to the community in terms of our environmental well-being and our commitment to mitigating climate change risks. That surely has a value in itself that would stand a little bit outside what the dollars and cents looks like in terms of the revenue we get for it, the expense we put out for it. Was that calculated at all, or, and if it wasn't, how would you consider that in this scope?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to try and help with that question, but I put up this slide, the previous slide to that. So all of those terrific attributes that you talk about are probably the same thing for Municipality B and Municipality F and all of them, really. So I think what was driving some of the discussion for this one is the costing, our commodity pricing, how we sell product, where we're selling it, are we doing as well as some others from a commodity perspective, and all of those other pieces, Councillor, still apply. So it's good for the environment. We certainly have the benefit of, you have a closed landfill site. We don't, I'm sure you don't get any calls saying, please build another landfill site here in Guelph. And that's because you've invested this way for this and our organics facility. And so there is a lot of benefit of not having to put these things in a landfill site. We just saw that there's an opportunity here on the dollars and cents sides for us to take a little bit of a further, deeper dive on, so what's driving sort of a negative, it doesn't really matter which one you pick, but what's driving what you would see as a positive revenue for them at 84 bucks a ton and a cost to us at $92 a ton. That piece, I think, is the important driver for us, because all the other benefits should be there for all of us. I would imagine all these municipalities are likely in the same boat of, we'd like not to build a new landfill site, or we'd like to haul as little as possible to a landfill site. So we haven't built it into the cost. We built it into our thought process of it's likely even across all the municipalities as a driver. That's helpful.
I think it is. Thank you very much. I guess just come down to the crunch. We need to bear that in mind, that, well, maybe it looks like we're behind a little on that, but if we are ahead in the value that it provides to the community's well-being, that must have a financial value of itself.
So, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, of course. We'll walk you through some of these numbers. If that number 92, in this particular case, 9263, is driven by our desire to not open up a landfill site, but the others that's not a concern, we would identify that. If that's an expenditure we have that's unique from the others, because we've done something to avoid a larger cost. You're right, there is a benefit to that. And if we see that, we will identify it, particularly on this file. This is the one that really stands out a bit. So I don't believe there is anything like that, but we hear you on that question, and we'll make sure that the final report articulates an answer so that you can feel satisfied that you asked it and it was answered clearly for you. So that.
Thank you very much.
And Councillor Downer, you're the last one on my list.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a follow-up to Councillor Alt's, but you know, there was a time when we spent over $10 million looking for a landfill site within Guelph's and Wellington County borders, and that sort of speaks to this. So the legislation at that time was that you had to look after your waste in your own community, which sort of led to the looking for the landfill and then the wet-dry center. But then the legislation changed, and we'd spent all that money looking for a landfill site here in the city. There was quite a few, right across from Sleeman's. There was
all kinds of locations that were studied at millions of dollars. So it takes me back to the legislation change that's coming. And Councillor Alt's point that, you know, I just concern about being cautious as we move forward, because we don't really know the extent of that legislation change. And so, while I don't think we can wait till 2019 to make some of the changes. I do think that we do, having been through a number of government changes on these things, that we do need to be cautious on the types of big changes that we make until we really know what that impact is going to be. And as your report says, we don't know what the impacts will be on funding, on contracts with the private sector or public unions, and public expectations and servicing levels. And those could amount to huge dollars. So I think we just need to be careful before we make any, we may be looking at being a little more cautious as we move forward on that. That's all. So I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Oh. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that certainly will influence the final report. I think there is a caution. We've certainly got indications from the province in August of this year that they want to do some things with the Blue Box program. They've teed up some sort of key dates in my mind, I think, February of 2018. That would be a key one. Did they actually land that date? And then that drives sort of some early adopters in the early part of 2019. So I think we'll, through an abundance of caution, we'll certainly layer that into any decision making here. And then ultimately, what you're seeing here is a view for us to sort of deal with sort of continuous improvement. And I think that's a safe place for us to look at, perhaps, with a view that there's pending legislative change. But I think any changes we might make that change that left-hand column on this particular slide might be viewed very positively on where the province and the producers might end up want to
go. Sure, Councillor Van Helmen.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. This slide that's up, the benchmarking one, speaks as to how and why some of these people get the same amount of tonnage and they're below the line, are making money. Because it for someone like myself, and I think people may be watching at home, what do they do so different? What do they do so right? And what do we do so wrong? And I think we maybe have to go into more detail, but if we could get that for down the road.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the simple answer to that is yes, and that will be part of sort of the final report that we bring forward. That's exactly the question that drives us as well. Is there something to be learned here? Sometimes it's very local, when it's not a really they're onto something brilliant, and we ought to replicate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, that was it on the questions for the presentation. So we're going to get to the delegations now, and again, thank you very much for being patient. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One of our delegations is not able to make it tonight, so we have our president for QP Local 241, Paul. You're here, and if you want to come forward, Paul. Just so everyone knows, you have 5 minutes for the delegations, and you'll hear a chime when there's 30 seconds left. And then after every delegation is done, I always open it up to council just in case there's any questions for follow-up. And whenever you're ready, Paul, just take your time and then go ahead. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Councillors, Mayor Guthrie, the gallery, members of the labor community, and members of our bargaining unit 241, it's a privilege to address you tonight. I'd like to make it clear from the beginning, QP has a lot of experience in the matter of public services and in solid waste services right across this country. We have dealt with this issue of consequences of privatization for decades. And it's not a good story. There's a lot of material out there that points to people trying to bring stuff back in the house. We have a great asset here in the city of Guelph at the MRF. Selling it, contracting out, or private-public partnerships are all just ways to move community assets into the private sector and out of our control in the city of Guelph. Solid waste services are core services in this community. They're well respected by the citizens of Guelph, and they should not be sold off. Maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, old school, call it what you want, but I am the president of the union, and I was a president back when I first started here in the city of Guelph in 1989, and now I'm president back here in 2017. But I believe in the public services. I believe what we deliver at the MRF and in solid waste is vital to what we are as a community. I can't stress it enough that, you know, there's a lot of history in the MRF. And I think that we need to look at ways to improve the MRF, and it can be done. But it has to be done with the idea around this horseshoe that the public really believe in public services. Council believes in public services, what we do. There are community things that we have values in this city. Compared to some of the comparators that you may have seen on the screen tonight. Maybe the diversion rates, we need to show that up on the screen also tonight. But I'll tell you right now, they're not where we are in diversion rates. It's our core values and what you as elected people want and what our community values. As a president, I value what we do. And I'm community-based. That's why I'm active in the union. Councillor Billings brought up a really good point, and so did Phil. I'll say this, that the Waste Diversion Act, it is something that you can't ignore. This process shouldn't go ahead unless we look at the Waste Diversion Act. Because there could be things that, if you were to sell that asset at the MRF, there could be things that when that's all the regulations come down, and they're not coming down this year. They won't be here when you are asked to make a decision on November the 20th. It is not going to happen. That could mean that you have an asset that you might be able to turn some revenue over into this community. Please take a hard look at what might happen and don't make our decisions prematurely, because that could have a strong effect if you were to sell that asset, our P3 it. There are more than environmental concerns, and it was brought up also. An example of that, Dylan admits in the start of their own report to you that an apples-to-apples comparison with other services was not possible. And I think by some of the questions that were raised tonight, I think you got to that. You found that there wasn't a comparable. In the last slide, in Councillor of Andy Van Helmen's, is that it? What's that noise?
Keep going.
Oh, okay.
It's 30 seconds. I'll give you a bit more time. I understand.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you have a lot more or no?
Well, I just got through the first page.
Is it a novel or a choose your own adventure? Like, what do you have there?
It's a two-pager.
It's a two-pager? Okay. Well, look, it's a special council meeting. I want to be able to be respectful to the delegations that we have here. I won't let it go a little bit further if that's okay with council, but I'll give you a little bit of leniency to get through that next page. If you just go on, and then don't worry, I'm sure
I'll try to speed up my.
Okay, and if you could just stop the timer, please, because I just took about 20 seconds of your last 30 seconds. So I'm going to give you an extra minute there. You go ahead, okay?
Okay. So I think the questions that you asked tonight around the horseshoe are some really good questions from the report. And I think that there's the questions of comparing and what you are comparing it to are some things that you really have to dig deep with. I also want to go back to the WDA, you need to understand, you need to really look hard at that. I do believe that the MRF, or that if there's issues with the MRF, we can fix those problems. We have 47 individuals that work in there. They're community jobs. They're jobs that people in this community, we don't want to see them outsourced and you taking jobs out of our community for people that work in this community, are part of this community. And I think that I can't spell that out any clearer. We live in this community. We should support this community. And I have to tell you, I believe that we want good jobs. Okay, 29, 20. Okay, anyways, I just want to thank you very much for allowing me tonight. I'm newly elected. I got elected in July 26th this year. I don't know much about waste diversion. I've been here 29 years. But all I'm going to say is I'm learning a lot. And I know that as councillors, you have a lot of other public things going on in your careers as councillors. And I respect your leadership roles. Take your time with this. There's a lot. I'm learning a lot. And I've been in this role for just over a month. And I didn't know much about it before I got into it. But there's a lot going on with this, on this service review. So please look at it and look at it strong. And thank you very much for your time. And I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Paul. And questions for Paul at this time? Councillor Piper?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for your delegation. I know you said you're learning a lot and you've been in this role for a month, and solid waste is a learning experience. One of the best things that I did when I became a new councillor, I think Councillor Salisbury and Councillor Hofflin joined me, is we did a shift at the MRF, and what an eye-opener that was. And what I found during that experience was that many of the solutions were actually on the floor. People working the floor had the solutions to some of the efficiency, and that was 10 years ago. So my question to you is, as we're examining efficiencies, as we're looking at potential solutions, are you hearing in your role that that some of the solutions are coming from the membership, that they have ideas on how to provide, how to enact efficiency, that the solutions are on the floor?
Well, in any workplace, in any job, you can hire a consultant if you think you can get the answers. Honestly, the answers that you're looking for are the people that do the job. If there's improvements to be made in a workplace, hiring an outside person to come into your facility, hiring a consultant, look at Guelph Transit, when you have drivers that know the ins and the problems, you can ask, that's where you're gonna get the solutions. Hiring somebody that doesn't live in this community, doesn't have an investment in this community, you can't ignore the frontline worker. The frontline workers, and I know some of them are here tonight, and I've talked with some of those individuals. I know that there's a lot that you can get from that information. And I believe that. Thank you.
And that's it for. So I hate saying what I'm going to say, but I know council's already kind of smiling at me, but we do have procedures and protocols in here in regards to sort of clapping and things like that. And the reason why we do it, please hear me out, is because you never know on the list, we might kind of know tonight, but you never know on the delegation list if someone's coming up next who may have a different point of view, and we want to just make it a respectful place when we're here. So. I let those 2 claps go for you, just for you, Paul. So. Well,
I'll return it to all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Now, next, Janice Folk Dawson is here. And Andrew Cleary, you are in the wings. And again, if we could just we'll keep it to the 5 minutes, unless you have, that last kind of little wrap up. Go ahead, Janice, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Guthrie, City Councillors, and fellow community members. My name is Janice Folk Dawson. I am a 31-year resident of Guelph and presently reside in Ward 5. I am privileged to be the president of the Guelph and District Labor Council, representing over 9,000 workers who work, live, and care greatly about the sustainability and access to good services in the Guelph area. I am here to urge you to keep Guelph's Material Recovery Facility, the MRF, fully public. It would be a real setback for our community to sell or in any way privatize the MRF for short-sighted purposes. Public ownership and local control of our core services are critically important for our community, and we look to you, our elected councillors, for leadership in putting the needs of our community first. I am proud of our city workers, the members of CUPE who have the knowledge and skills to run our services safely and smoothly, and more importantly, in a way that is publicly accountable. And in return, they make decent wages and benefits and follow proper protocols to assure their own safety as well as the safety of the public. There are over 40 good jobs that strengthen our community and provide for a hopeful future for the next generation. The City of Guelph has a role in maintaining good jobs that can sustain families. You also have a responsibility for setting a long-term vision for our community. This means being more thoughtful than just looking at a single bottom line or immediate potential gains that brings future risks. We understand that there are many unanswered questions about the report presented to you by Dillon Consulting. Their claim is that the MRF has been underperforming, but there are a number of critical metrics that have been left out of their analysis. The report has not looked at the social impact of privatization or the environmental risks. Without looking at these impacts, what good are any of the conclusions in the report? If there are challenges in the MRF, why would we not explore the potential ways in which City could further enhance while continuing to publicly maintain the service? Instead, the report has been framed in a way that is committed to privatization without assessing its full reality. How many more privatization gone wrong scandals do we need before we stop listening to this kind of faulty advice? From other jurisdictions, there is evidence on privatization is clear and consistent. Privatization eliminates good jobs. Privatization compromises our safety and environmental sustainability. Privatization costs more in the long run. That is why in many jurisdictions, municipalities are remunicipalizing services and bringing them back in-house. We are facing a broader precarious job crisis, which gets worse with the pressure of privatization. I get it. There's a lot of money to be made in private contracts, for a few. There's a lot of money to be made by consultants pitching privatization too. Again, for a few. It serves them, but not us, the community. Most of the so-called savings or so-called efficiencies come directly from exploiting workers, from cutthroat contractors and subcontractors who pay too little, don't provide safe work environments or proper equipment for workers to do their jobs. Our own City Auditor General's report made this point as well. We do not accept solutions that remove public oversight and diminish democratic accountability. We strongly encourage you to keep this and all of our City of Guelph services public. Our city can adapt to challenges in our service delivery by looking at how to enhance our services in a way that is safe and responsible, and most importantly, publicly accountable. Thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you. And with 36 seconds to spare, so well done. Well done. Thank you, Janice. Is there any questions for Janice at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much. Andrew, you are up, President of ATU Local 1189, and in the wings we have, is Marty Williams here? I don't think I saw him. Nope, okay. And then, for sure, Ted Pritchard is here. You're in the wings, Ted, okay? Andy, go ahead.
Hello, Mayor, councilors, staff, and community members. I am Andrew Cleary, the ATU 1189 President. I learned a lot of information listening to this report this evening. And it took me back a bit in time. I've lived in this city for 50 years, and it is my job to put the garbage out to the curb. And I appreciate that someone picks it up and I bring the bins back in. And it's been my duty for 50 years, and I always appreciated the garbage man. It's a great service. I like the number of the 48,000 residents who rely on this this service, and I'm impressed that we collect that much garbage by this division. I'm also impressed that we have some partnership with regards to Wellington Organic Waste, who help bring it in below average. So, thank you for some great information on that presentation slide. It helps me to better understand and be informed on the issues within the city of Guelph and how we can make Guelph more efficient. I preach it at Transit a lot because that's my expertise. Waste is not. Although we will learn with Paul. He's only been a month, so we will learn with him. But like he said, he was a president when he first got involved, and that was because of the community that he served. I'm sure of it. It's why I became a union activist, a labor activist, to ensure that the worker is treated with dignity and respect. But I also I like to learn. So the PDO, where the combined services there on that slide, also come in below. I think that QP 241 members are doing a great job. Thank you, brothers and sisters of QP 241, the workers of Guelph. Keep up the great job, and we will try and keep all our services public with regards to that. Another point that I did come up with was the MRF, I guess they call it, and the numbers. I'm wondering, are they skewed by the time in which we were accepting recyclables that were not actually profitable? So I wonder if that's a question that was done in the audit or the service review to bring up their inefficiencies or why their numbers are above the average. So that was a question that was raised in my mind. So just in closing there, currently the services are publicly owned and delivered by the residents of the Guelph. Publicly owned services have higher resident satisfaction, more accountability, and better environmental performance than privately owned companies. Mayor, Council, so through you, I would hope that you could keep Guelph services public. Also in saying that, I will look forward to this process. Obviously, we will probably undergo it as well at Guelph Transit, but we're very interested in seeing the efficiencies and hearing the efficiencies. 5 out of 6, I think. That was great news. So in closing, I just hope to keep everything in-house, right? Because there's nothing more important than the team. I heard one of the Murph guys back there tell me the coach speech, and we have him over there working at the Murph, and he's a very valued member of this community. So I would just hope that we continue on the road and do the service that we need to have the justice that we need. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
How much time?
48 seconds. So
hey.
Well done. Yep.
I didn't have a prepared one. I just wrote it on the fly.
Good job. Any questions for Andrew? Seeing none, thank you very much.
I was hoping for none.
So our last is Ted Pritchard. And I think we know what you're going to talk about. This is a surprise today. And you know the drill, Ted. Good to see you, and thank you for coming, and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Guthrie, councilors, city staff, and gallery members. Could I have 30 seconds of his extra time that he didn't use to talk about unions and not talk about condominiums? Okay, here's my 30 seconds on unions. I'm a taxpayer, and therefore I'm all these people's employers. And I want to be a good employer. I would like to run a union shop if the city of Guelph can deal with that. It just makes sense. We can afford that as a city to offer good jobs that people need to do for our city. Now I'm going to talk about probably condominiums at this point. So my name is Ted Pritchard. I'm chairperson of Fair Tax Campaign Guelph, and that's a local team of condominium owners working on behalf of Guelph condominium owners to obtain the goals of the Canadian Condominium Institute, that's CCI, which is fairness of access to city services paid for by condominium owners, but you already knew that. The Solid Waste Resources Business Service Review is extensive as far as it goes as an interim report, but has nothing to offer condominium owners in September. The final report in November promises to include condominium issues, but I fear this will be too late for staff to include solutions for condominiums in their 2018 budget proposals. The budget process is well underway in October. Another disappointment is that the Solid Waste Management Master Plan from 2014 was not considered in this report. Why? The SWMMP was vetted through Guelph residents and interested parties. It contains solutions to the problems condominium owners have with the city services. The earlier 2008 version of SWMMP promised to fix the holes left by the earlier version. Not to consider the SWMMP is an oversight by this report. Back in 2014, all of you ran in an election in support of Solid Waste Management Master Plan. Now I have a request to staff here. Could you possibly put up slide 8 of your original report? Now I'm not going to get to it for a couple of minutes, so you have, well, not that long, but a little bit of time, so you got a bit of time. So I have a problem with not including Solid Waste Management Master Plan. I also questioned some of the numbers in the report. I had no idea that in 2016 there were almost as many condominium units as single-family units. 26,000 condominium units, 26,000 condominium units as compared to 29,000 home units, single-family units, and 18,500 condominium units were being serviced by the city. Now, if you look at this chart, it says the 48,736 customers served. It also says 61% were single-family homes, 38% were ICI businesses, and 1% were condominiums. How do any of those numbers jive? That chart is wrong, or the numbers in the report are wrong. So that has to be rectified somehow. Now, I think it could be in the description of what a multicultural residential unit is. It talks about, the report describes multi-residential as 6 or more combined units. That definition could include townhouse condominiums, high-rise condominiums, rental townhouses, and rental high-rises. The province, through MPAC, uses multi-residential tax category to describe rental townhouses and rental high-rises, and lumps together all condominiums and units, all condominium units and single-family units in the same residential tax category. So the province uses multicultural differently than the city does. The city refers to condominiums as multi-residential, and has always put condominiums together with rental units. And that could be why the discrepancy in the numbers, but I would like that clarified as it goes through a report. So for example, Clifton Properties, which is a rental townhouse complex, looks like a condominium, but it's rental. So it's in a different tax category, and I look forward to seeing you again in November, and hopefully there will be some clarification for those numbers. Thank you for your attention, and I'd be pleased to try and answer questions.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions at this time? I do have one question for you, Ted.
Yeah.
You started your conversation just talking about the union factor, the jobs, and I wrote down, I think I caught what you said correctly, that you as the taxpayer, that you would like to try to provide the good union jobs that are here for those services. My question to you is, at any cost?
At a reasonable cost.
Okay.
I think I'm providing for those union jobs now as a taxpayer.
Sure, we all
and
are.
I think I could carry that burden over the next period of time. That's all I'm saying. It's something that I think I can bear anyway as a taxpayer.
Yep, and you answered it by saying at a reasonable cost, so
yeah,
that's
well,
a fair answer.
I think the cost now is reasonable. That's also what I'm saying.
Okay. So you believe that the report which states the $2.5 million issue is reasonable?
I didn't catch that particular part of, are you talking about the recycling services portion as to where there's, I don't understand why we would be so much over other communities, but I'm assuming that in November I'm going to find out.
Yeah, and we all will.
And I would suspect that if there are efficiencies to be made, they will be made. But if this is the only way Guelph can do its recycling, I've been satisfied with it till now, and I'm glad that my particular condominium is part of three-stream recycling, and that I can be environmentally conscientious because of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then Pat Fung was unable to attend tonight, so I am going, so thank you very much to all the delegations. So it's back to council now to ask any other, I kind of like what Councillor Salisbury said at kind of when he was asking his questioning about what he wants to see, like what's important to him to see that comes back. Our Deputy CAO, Scott, answered, yes, this is our eyes wide open moment to kind of capture what's important so that we see what comes back. And so I would just kind of throw that out to all of council to maybe treat it this moment in the same manner, that if there's something that you either heard from the delegations or something more you have thought of, like let's get it out in the open sort of now, so that there isn't that moment when it comes back to all of us in November and to the public that we're like, oh, I wish I had asked this, or I wish I had asked that. So I just wouldn't mind kind of making sure that everyone feels comfortable with what they want to say. So I saw a lot of hands go up here, but just give me 1 second. Councillor Gibson. So I struck you off the list originally because of the presentation. You said, did you have questions now then? So I'm going to go to you first, Councillor Billings, then I saw the other hands go up, okay?
Thank you for that, Mayor Guthrie. So I'll just go back to, well, first of all, I'd like to thank staff. That was a thorough presentation and walking us through all 6 services that are offered through our waste collection, and it was heartening to know that 5 of them are in good shape. If you could go to slide 24, if you don't mind, this is getting to the issue that you've articulated for us and how we're going to collectively walk through it. I heard reference to one of the reasons driving this variance or this delta. I'll call it delta because we are sitting at, if you go to slide 24, if you don't mind. If we are sitting at $92.63 of cost per ton, and you flip that to our comparators, some of our comparators are performing quite well in this area. Some of them are making $84 a ton. So I'm not looking at the $92 we're sort of losing. I'm looking at the full delta. So the full difference between the costs we're incurring and the benefits the other communities are seeing. And in some cases, we're talking about $150 a ton of delta. And the reason why I ask that, because I know we've had a lot of people talking tonight about the potential for regulatory change and the user pay and the extended producer responsibility. But when we move forward, I want to be clear, if there's any benefit to that regulatory change, I'd like it articulated, but I'd also like it articulated with the idea that the delta may still exist. So if we start earning another $100 a ton and we are turning $8 of profit per ton, we still may be $150 behind our closest competitor, because they're going to benefit from that regulatory change as well. So that's my comment question, that I wouldn't want to try and distract from the issue by putting too much emphasis on proposed regulatory changes when we are still dealing with a delta in some cases of $150 a ton. That would like to be my focus. If we can find improvements, that would be my focus, without emphasizing too much the potential for regulatory change when all communities across Ontario are set to benefit from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Billings.
Yes, the reason why I put my hand up is because you had mentioned that Pat Fung wasn't here this evening. However, he did send his material. And in one of the pages that we received, there's a highlighted question in there, and I was actually, and staff received this as well. And so if our staff can't answer this evening, that's okay, but I was wondering if they could respond, only because I'm curious myself with respect to, we have inconsistency of numbers between Dillon Consulting and the BMA report. So I was just wondering if staff want to comment, because they have the answer, that's great, but if not, could we get the answer later?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll come back to that later, because there's an awful lot of handwritten notes on there as well that I would... Yeah.
So there was just an original, it's attached to our addendum here, and then there's the presentation part as well, which you highlighted, but there's that. I think at this time, if you don't mind, Councillor Billings, I just want all of council to know, when we received this on, was it Thursday or Friday? Friday, I think, last week. Friday, was it Friday? Along with the CUPE correspondence, I emailed staff and said, could you please look at, I got it right here, could you please look at the information both CUPE and Mr. Fung sent to all of council today, and please prepare a response prepared for us, all of us. And I said, I'm not suggesting by Monday, because there was a lot of questions, but maybe before the final recommendation in November. So that was what I said. Staff said, we will definitely look at responses ready, and for sure we'll have it by the final report in November. So just so everyone is aware in the room, like, I acknowledged all the CUPE questions and the one that's attached here that you're referencing, Councillor Billings.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I've already said my piece earlier with respect to, we know the report's coming back, and I'd like to see all the costs, yes, the revenue, but all the costs, all the capital costs, amortization, interest, you name it, all the costs, so that we can have that solid financial picture. So in turn, we have that foundation in which we can make an informed decision. So, so that's what I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. And beside you, Councillor Salisbury, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as some final thoughts on the information I was looking for with regards to the comparators. I respect and understand the anonymity aspect of the comparators. I'm not looking to cause any grief with that, but what I would like would be some comprehensive community details for the comparators by letter. I'm talking things like whether they're single tier, two-tier, upper tier, lower tier, whether they're, what's the urban-rural split, what's the population range, and then, more waste management specific information, how many tiers, or sorry, how many streams of collection, anything that's relevant that you think is relevant that has helped our staff and the consultant in selecting which ones to use. I was also wondering, I was just trying to write down some quick notes here. You caught me real quick. The other thing that, with regards to this particular slide that we're looking at, because I noticed on 2.5, task 5 in the Dillon report, it speaks to this slide being different from all the other slides in that it includes 3 additional comparators because they were single stream MRFs. So if we could designate or delineate or separate the 2-stream MRFs from the single-stream MRFs in this. And similarly, I'm not looking to be micromanaging, but if there is no other rationale for ordering these, it would be nice if they were ordered by tonnage. to give us at least some level of trending. I mean, if I take a look at this as an example, it's hard for me to see, this isn't a great example, it's hard for me to see if there's a correlation between the tonnage that they handle and the correlating cost per ton. And I've looked through a number of the other slides, and they don't seem to really have any rhyme or reason as to the ordering, other than I think they're alphabetical, but since the alphabets, the letters are kind of meaningless to us, we're not identifying anything, it would just be one more piece of the puzzle that would help say, hey, you know, does the cost go up with the tonnage, or does the cost go down, that kind of a thing. And as I said before, you know, if we spoke with 6 communities on any given issue, or 12 communities, or 10 communities, and the consultant chose for a good reason not to include them, I'd like to have that information presented in the graph as well, so that I know, you know, why they, you know, and ideally, if the data is there, if the cost per tonnage is there, it would be great to see what it is, even if it's been excluded from the list. So, you know, if they were excluded from the list because they were all lower tier municipalities, but lower tier municipalities are, you know, cheaper or whatever. I'm looking to get that comfort that I didn't have with the fear of statistical bias with the really heavy scoping of our indicators on these. So I hope I'm clear. Any questions? Well, you know how to reach me. Give me a call. But don't come home with me.
Yeah.
Okay? I appreciate the offer as well, but
okay, I'm back over to this side, Councillor Piper.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, one of the pieces that would be really helpful to me coming back is, I know in the report we're told we process about 23,000 tons of recyclables, but how many commodity streams do we have 18 different commodity streams, and how many of those commodity streams are generating positive revenue? Because I seem to recall, even from the shift we did at the MRF, that we're taking recyclables off the line that don't have a commodity value. Either they're not currently cash positive, or there's actually no market for them and we're just giving them away. But we're doing it because it's important to divert from landfill. And that goes back to the diversion question, is that we have the highest diversion rate in Ontario, but one of the consequences of that is we might not actually be getting cash for some of the commodities that we're pulling off the line. So I'd like some sense of where the revenue is coming from, and whether our diversion rates are actually, because our diversion rates are so good, whether that's influencing the bottom line in our per tonnage cost. Another thought that I had in terms of when the report comes back is getting a sense of whether or not, at what point are we going to re-engage and maybe this isn't a statistical question, at what point are we going to re-engage our frontline workers? And the reason I say that is we engaged them at the onset with Dillon Consulting, brought them in as part of the consultation process at the beginning. We've now created the report, and we have this next imperative, and the next imperative is for us to start to debate efficiencies and to go down the road of difficult conversations. I think that's the point where we need to re-engage our frontline staff, because some of the solutions are going to come from there. So the question is, and you don't have to answer it tonight, but do we have another engagement point for our frontline staff before we get the report back, or embed it in the report, so that we can include their perspective and their solutions as part of the material we have for the next debate we have in November. And then just a final comment is that how eye-opening it is to actually tour the MRF or work a shift at the MRF. And I know we've had invitations to do tours in the past, but this might be between now and the report being final, whether there's an opportunity for council to do another tour, or even better, I would challenge our executive team and council to do a shift, or even a couple of hours of a shift at the MRF, and some of the solutions might become evident to us. So those are my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move receipt of the report.
Okay. Sorry, seconded by, I heard someone, Councillor Hoffman? Yeah, okay. No other further questions at this time that you need? Okay, I am actually over to Councillor Hoffman.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Guthrie. So I wanted to start by saying that I don't want to lose sight of the good news in the initial review, because the review does reflect that Guelph is responsive to our community needs and that our performance is in line with our comparator municipalities in all but one area. So I think that's really important for us to remember tonight while we're having these discussions. A couple of things I wanted to ask, and my first question to Mr. Stewart would be, could you speak to the tight timelines? I'm feeling that they're tight timelines. Staff might not feel that they're tight timelines, but could you enlighten us as to November? That's only like 6 or 7 weeks away.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, and again, some of the answer is subject to the information that we'll be layering in tonight as well from the discussions with you and the community. What's driving some of this is we have a negative variance, so there's a budget component to all of this. You know, we just can't avoid that part of it, of course. And there's some things on the next step slide that have budget ramifications. So in an ideal world, we were trying to make sure that we can convey messages from the service review, especially sort of the good news that led to some of the next step news. And, you know, as one of the delegates said, there's nothing in there on multi-res impacting the budget, but that would be the next step, as you would see something in the budget schedule. So right behind the November 20th schedule is December 5th or 6th, I think, is our budget presentation on the operating side. So we've got a view to try to put some of this into the budget piece. We might have a discussion and maybe separate those moments. And we'll have to update you on that if there's additional material that we've got to do tonight that we couldn't deliver for the 20th. That might impact some of that thought process. So there may be an update from us as we sort of debrief collectively on what we've heard, what we're collecting, what have we still got to collect to get in, and then we'll come back to you with perhaps a change schedule, perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. And another question I had, if I may, Mr. Mayor, is one of our delegates spoke to the solid waste master plan, and I wondered, did the consultant or did staff look at the results of our solid waste management master plan and incorporate, or I guess weigh them to ensure there was the input from the management plan included in the review?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple of things from that. It's certainly embedded into our thought process, but it's not in scope of a service review. It's not a master plan review. This was a service review of the service. However, having said that, it has led us to things like, so why is leaf and yard waste behind others? And that's the stuff that you leap onto and say, well, that's part of the master plan. So one of the outcomes from this sort of piece is the continuous improvement, and now will influence the master plan. And you heard me say a couple of hours ago that that's one of the areas that we'll have to spend some time on, is updating the master plan so that we're never always way behind on these things. So that's good news that will influence it, but it certainly wasn't in scope in how to do the service review.
Thank you for that. And following up on Mayor Guthrie's request, I suppose, about maybe a wish list, I would like in the next report for staff to explore the implications on the environmental and community goals. I know that's a really it's hard to measure, but I think it really will speak to what this community, how they feel about the environment and climate change. And I'm hoping to see something in the report when it comes back around that. And following up on Councillor Piper's request, I hope also that staff will poll our existing staff at the MRF to have them share their insights on efficiencies. And lastly, I'm up for any challenge, Councillor Piper. Been there.
Bench press 300 pounds. I wouldn't do that.
Councillor Alt, you're last on the list.
Thank you. Just let me go on record as stating that Councillor Hoffland bench presses 400 pounds every day, and that's because she carries her husband downstairs when he is carrying the water softener salt, and so it's a good job she does. A couple of points. I appreciate Councillor Hoffland and Councillor Piper raising the issues they did, because there are a couple of concerns that I think are getting confused in here, and I don't think that we can avoid the elephant that's in the room. From each and every one of the speakers, including Mr. Pritchard and Mr. Clulo, there were concerns about privatizing, and I think we have to address that elephant in the room and address it very clearly. And Councillor Hoffland identified that the issue of privatizing and the issue of quality of jobs and potentially discounting wages and work standards is tied up in that. So I would like, as part of my wish list, to address that in however a delicate way as we possibly can. And I do thank the presenters, and I do thank the staff, and I do thank the consultants for presenting this report, because it's raised many, many questions for us. The one question that I would like to have addressed, if it's at all possible, for the next time we come back, is the relationship between what Simcoe provides us versus what Guelph does, what the commodities are, and what the contamination ratio is. Whether, in fact, there is any possibility that we have an issue there that needs to be addressed. I thank Councillor Piper for identifying the various streams that we put things into, and the fact that some of them aren't even profitable, which points to an absolute lack of rationale in public policy coming from the provincial government that I think that we have to address as we go through the Waste Free Ontario Act as well. That's absurd. If we have to recycle it, but then we can't do anything with it, all that we're really doing is moving it from a landfill over here to a warehouse over there, and that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and it's putting us, in many respects, in conflict with our own community members who are workers who are rightly feeling that their jobs are potentially on the line. The other question, I was wondering if we could please also respond. You mentioned a negative variance, which is a concern to me, Mr. Stewart, and I'm wondering if we could identify how the negative variance is potentially going to be compensated for through any possibility of jobs being privatized. I'm presuming it's not a fait accompli. Certainly I'm not in favor of privatizing, and I don't see business service reviews from that perspective. I see them from the perspective of moving into the future. So if it is at all possible, if we could look at the ratio between those that are potentially losing their jobs and the negative variance, that would be appreciated.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Except for Councillor Billings.
No, and I apologize. It was just all this extra residual waste talk. So my first question is through you to Councillor Piper. Did you say we have the highest diversion rates, or we are among the highest for diversion rates?
Well, I thought last year, 2016, we were the highest. But I know
okay, so I was wondering if staff could comment on that. And the reason why I'm asking is because I couldn't get that answer earlier. So that's the first question. And the other one is, going back on the whole, residual waste numbers, if we are looking at the other options versus contracting out or re-engineering, is it possible to even surmise what those residual numbers would be? I don't know, but if we could. So for example, if other municipalities are contracting out, what are their numbers? What are their percentages? And I don't know that. So I was just wondering if that's something that we had looked at.
Through your worship to Councillor Billings, in terms of diversion, we're among the top 5. We're struggling to maintain our diversion rate as we're seeing packaging materials change, consumer habits change, so our waste is increasing, and for instance, our recycling is staying the same. So although the volume of recycling is increasing, the weight is staying the same, and it's measured by weight. So there's a few challenges in the diversion calculation we're working through, and you may recall earlier in the year we were out doing curbside audits to reduce contamination, increase diversion. So it's a constant effort to maintain that diversion rate, and that's a testament to the folks who are on our programs and our bylaw and our collections folks who are out there working hard to keep that front of mind for the citizens. And I cannot answer the second question you had in terms of the residual rates relative to different options, if I think I heard you correctly. we could try and look at that, but I'm not sure that will come out of that review, but we'll keep that in mind.
Okay, so right now, through you, Mr. Mayor, from the MRF, from our recyclables, what is that diversion rate? What's the percentage?
Our diversion rate is around 59% currently, so it's dropped below 60. And in terms of tonnage, I'd have to get back to you on the specific. Yeah.
Thanks, Cam.
You're welcome.
I believe I remember, just to give some history, of what I recall as a councillor is when the bins came in, it was stated to council to be prepared that there would probably be a drop in the diversion rate, because it just makes sense, right? You naturally go from the bags, which you can see through and be able to observe contamination within the bags, to the bins where you can't. So I know that they're going from the bags to the bins. We were told in advance that there was probably going to be a drop. I'll just give some history, my thoughts on that. Okay, that's it. I'm about to call the vote on receiving this, but I have a couple of my own little questions as well that I wouldn't mind, and a couple of comments before I call the vote. I guess one of the things, what I would like to have you consider and maybe potentially address in the final report is, if multi-res were to become an option for us to implement in 2018, would then there be a new opportunity with lots of material to then be recycled and sorted? So could that become a new stream, a new possibility from almost like a business case perspective, that then that's a whole bunch of new material that would be able to go to the MRF and then be sorted and so on. So I know it's a little bit of a what-if scenario, but if that's what you're thinking, I hope that. But if that's what you're thinking for 2018 or beyond for council to consider, then is that thought process going into the final recommendation? So that's one. I think maybe all of my other ones have actually been. Councillor Hoffland asked one of my other questions. So actually all of my other ones have been asked already. So I just want to say a couple comments. I appreciated some of the commentary tonight, especially from the president of the ATU, not that I discounted the other ones, but just this particular one, where he said that this service review has helped him and helped others to see and learn more about how the city can be more efficient. And so that kind of ties in with what Councillor Hoffland said, which is what I was going to say as well, which we can't lose sight on the 5 out of the 6 that the service review has indicated is doing really well. And that comment ties in with another comment I heard maybe once or twice from some of the delegates tonight, especially around sort of belittling the consultants or our staff that are tied in with that a little bit. That when I hear comments like things about the consultants, that you get the answers you're already looking for and things like that, well, the consultants are the ones that just told us that 5 out of the 6 are doing really well. So I think you can't really say that you're going to discount what the consultants did when 5 out of the 6 answers coming from the consultants are saying that they're doing really well. So just thought I would say that as well. I like the fact that both the union president and was mentioned also Councillor Piper and others indicated the boots on the ground, the frontline workers, hearing from them, opportunities to engage with them. And actually I'll step in right now and ask that as a question, because I know you kind of posed it out there as a comment, but I'll just follow up because I was going to ask the same. Will you be engaging a little bit more with them before the final report?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so I'm glad you sort of threw that back as a question, because we're already engaging with them. As you heard from Peter earlier, we've got the base camp account set up for them. We meet on a monthly basis with all solid waste staff. We meet with their toolkit for our supervisors to have tailgates. We've got a specific web page on the city's internal infonet, and we have face-to-face meetings and lunches with solid waste employees. And we've got quarterly updates where we're getting back to people. So we've got lots of ongoing opportunities. It's not just sort of a thought this evening, there's ongoing opportunities so that our frontline staff are fully engaged and we're listening and we're not discounting anything that we hear, we're documenting it all so that we can come back to it. And some's very specific to this and there's some other thoughts that get presented. And we've been making changes to some degree at the MRF. It's been a facility that's been ignored for quite some time, and we've made some changes to lunchrooms and areas of work that, quite frankly, should have been done a long time ago, and we really shouldn't have had someone have to tell us that. So there is some things that we've been doing this year to improve. It's a place of work that we should all be proud of and comfortable coming to, and it shouldn't be the sort of the poor cousin to other operations. And so I think that's a reflection of sort of where we are as an executive team as well, that we've got to engage the frontline staff, and certainly our CEO does town halls, and people are free to check. We check titles at the door, and they're free to share whatever they like, and Derek certainly encourages that, and we act on it after it's brought up to his attention as well.
Okay, thank you very much on that. So the last just couple comments I have are, the way I look at, this is our first service review. I'm so pleased that we are doing them. Basically, to me, it comes out that there's kind of three options that come as outcomes. One, we're good. It shows that we're good on something. Two, it shows we're good, but we are now able to do a bit better. So the service review has been able to find some efficiencies and some opportunities to actually do the service even better. Or the third is, we're not good, and we got to figure something out. Like, those are really the sort of the outcomes of what these service reviews are giving to us as an organization, and that's exactly what's before us tonight. I'm looking forward to the other ones as well. Now, unlike Councillor Alt, respectfully, Councillor Alt just indicated that he was not for privatization at all. Everyone knows what I'm probably about to say here. I'm in favor of all options on the table until the final report comes to us in November. I think discounting one option is actually a disservice to the value of what we are here to do for the taxpayers' dollars. And so it doesn't mean that I'm going to hit the button for that, but I don't want to discount any options at this point until we have all the final report in front of us. So with that, I'll call the vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So that is it for us, and I just need an adjournment. Councillor Bell is not here again. Councillor Gibson I saw. Councillor Billings I saw for second. All in favor to adjourn. That is passed. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.